In the next step of strategic workforce planning, you need to determine forecasting scenarios. Do you anticipate your company growing its revenue by 10% next year, 20%? What about the next 3 to 5 years? You need to align the model assumptions for strategic workforce planning with the strategic plans. Likely there were a series of assumptions related to market conditions, growth and maturity of markets, planned acquisitions, consolidation and efficiency gains that went into the overall business strategy in the first place. When you're looking at your data and starting to figure out the forecasting scenarios that you wish to run, you also need to determine how much of your history is representative of your future. In looking at the impact of the economic downturn of 2008, what many companies are seeing in their data is that if they look at the data prior to 2008, it's almost a different world of data than the data produced after 2008. So in many cases, you have to judge how many years back are you going to go in order to use those numbers to forecast forward in your scenarios. Once you know the scenarios you wish to investigate, you can begin to create forecasting models. To be clear, these models that I'm showing are future headcount needs. This slide shows a very basic high-level model. On the top half of the model, we log the historical trends of the current employee base and project items like terminations and retirements going forward. This is a section of the model which can be completed without participation from the particular business area. Note that we split the retirement factor from terminations in this model since we model them differently. This is because this example is in a country which is impacted by the baby boomer wave. The second part of the model aligns to business plans to take into account any substantial changes coming up. You can also use this type of model to predict your recruitment needs in order to see if you have enough recruitment staff to handle the workload. I have also created more complex models based on assessing which factors drive workload levels in various areas of the company. There is no right way to create a headcount model. In fact, it is unlikely that you will create your models the same way each time for all areas of the company, especially if you operate in more than one country. Different workforce challenges will create the need to structure the model in different ways. Additionally, this is only a basic model of headcount. It is very useful to proceed further to provide an estimated cost of the workforce, recruiting needs, and even capacity planning. In this slide, I'd like to return to the topic that I introduced in a previous section called significant events. If you were to be presented with this data from 2008 to 2014, what would you say about retirements, voluntary terminations, and involuntary turnover? Take a moment to consider what you would forecast forward based on the trends you see. When I take a look at this data, I see a few points that are a little bit unusual. If we take a look at just the first row that says retirements, it looks like in 2008, 15% of people retired. In 2014, 25% of people retired. But in 2009 to 2012, the number stays between 5 and 9%. So to me, the 2008 data shown in yellow and the 2014 data in blue looks a little out of the ordinary. When we go down and we look at the next row of voluntary terminations, which are for non-retirement reasons, again, 2014 looks a little strange. All of the other values are between, say, 1 and 1.5%, and suddenly it spikes to 9%. On the third line, when we look at involuntary turnover, we see in 2010 that there's suddenly a jump that's more than twice the rate of the previous years. It is situations like these that make it very important to have recorded the significant events in a company's history. For this particular company, we discovered in their history that in 2008 they offered early retirement packages to their employees. This now explains the number in yellow and why it is significantly higher than what we would anticipate in a typical year. In 2010, the company did a reduction in force, so layoffs or redundancies, whichever terminology you wish to use. This explains why the involuntary turnover rate in 2010 is more than twice as high as what we see in a typical year. Finally, in 2014, explaining the blue data of very high retirements and very high voluntary termination that aren't retirements, we see that the company offered a voluntary resignation incentive program. So when we start to put these things together to try and project our model forward to anticipate future headcount needs, we have to do a combination of considering both what the data tells us, what the true trends are, and a bit of common sense and judgment to know which numbers are artificially skewed, because you want to project based on numbers that you anticipate are representative of the company's future.